Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So I recently finished writing a paper about optimism, and more specifically, how we can overcome pessimism with faith. So when you hear these words, pessimism, optimism, chances are pretty good it's going to conjure up that image in your mind of the glass with the water in it, right? And depending on how you're feeling today, you're either going to be seeing it as half empty or half full. Now, if I had to summarize this paper in one sentence, here it is. When we live our lives through the lens of Islam, in belief as well as embodying it completely in our lives, what you're going to find is that the glass is not only half full, it's actually brimming over. And that's not just an illusion or perception, that's reality. And that's because it's a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's reasonable to ask the question, well, how do I realize that kind of lasting and real optimism in my life, particularly given the climate that we're living in? You know, studies are showing we can perceive it around us. People have a heightened sense of pessimism, fear, anxiety, and it's natural because there's so much adversity right now in the world. In fact, it's what motivated me to write this paper in the first place. So I'm going to share with you 3 takeaways from this paper that summarize it. They're practical, but they're very profound. Might sound like simple words, but if we can implement these in our lives, you'll see that they're actually deeply connected to optimism. Because indeed, these make up the foundation of Islam itself. When you look at the seerah, you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the first thing we find, it's really the backbone of his existence, is his connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That meaningful connection, I'm not talking about just praying on time because it's obligatory, but having a meaningful connection where at every step he would remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in some fashion, regardless of the situation. It could be imminent fear just before meeting the enemy on the battlefield, or it could be a personal, situation of loss, grief. It could just be a 24-hour period where everything is just a normal day in the life of, as we say. But he's constantly remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What that carries in it is the powerful message that we're never really alone. We have a place to go. We can hand everything over to the one who is ultimately in control, who affects change, who brings about the positive outcome that we seek in our lives naturally. And that's really what enabled the Prophet ﷺ to move forward with optimism, the kind of constancy that he had with that, so that he could smile all the time. That's where it came from. The second point I want to mention that's very powerful, but sometimes we don't realize it, is that emotions are not to be denied. Islam doesn't tell us that you should just cast them aside. In fact, if you look at the messengers that Allah chose, they were all humans, and they all experienced a spectrum of challenges, and with that, numerous emotional ups and downs. And what that teaches us is that there's a way to deal with those situations when they arise. And the powerful message in there from an Islamic point of view is rechannel it. Take the fear, take the pessimism, take the anxiety, and rechannel it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This really gets into deeper issues, which I talk about in the paper. They're all tied to a reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something we call tawakkul, and an innate belief that everything that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ultimately going to have good in it, even though you and I don't perceive it. We sometimes see it as evil happening in the world, and indeed there are bad things happening. But with that, there are things that we don't perceive. And there's a higher purpose, and there's wisdoms that are beyond us. But in handing these things over to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one is enabled to continue forward. It doesn't become a stopping factor. The third and final point is that of gratitude. This is something that shouldn't be foreign to us, even from the point of view of what psychologists will tell you, that generally happy people are grateful people. The two are linked together very significantly. And in fact, it is one of the primary qualities of people who are optimistic. And gratitude is also a primary quality within a believer. It's a central theme to Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the believer, if we just look at the number of times we say Alhamdulillah in the course of a day, we're constantly reminded to be grateful to Allah. Allah mentions it repeatedly in the Qur'an. In fact, He promises those that are grateful that I will give you more. If you are grateful to me, I will increase you with more good. So this is something that can profoundly change our outlook on life, to the point where not only is the glass half full, because that's what I see, but the blessings from Allah are beyond what I see, sometimes imperceivable, to the level that we are constantly reminded that be grateful. You may not see it right now, but be grateful it's there. So going back to why I wrote this paper, I really wanted to draw inspiration from it for myself, to be reminded of these amazing things that we have in our deen. And I hope that you too will find comfort and reassurance and guidance through this as well. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.